We've come to the last panel of the day, and as Toby and Andrew have reminded me, the best panel of the day, but I think that they're a little biased because I think so far we've had two outstanding panels, and I think this will be the icing on the cake. I just want to go over just quickly about the commercial and civil SSA, some of the areas we're going to discuss. I'll give a brief introduction of the panel, Colonel Blake, and then get rolling into the discussion. But with shrinking budgets and a demand for increased SSA capabilities, require governments to leverage commercial and civil aerospace technologies to play a vital role in protecting and ensuring the peaceful use of space. This panel will examine how commercial and civil entities can meet the demands of providing low-cost systems with a rapid deployment schedule. Hosted payloads, commercial launch capabilities, small agile spacecraft, and mobile broadband capabilities are some of the technologies needed to fill the gaps and provide urgent needs to the warfighter. After my earlier introduction, which was labeled weird, I was instructed just to mention of Colonel Blake that he's been in the Air Force for 17 years and keep it simple. But with his background, I think it'd be hard to just glean over many of his accomplishments as one of the rising stars in today's Air Force. Colonel Blake joined DARPA in September of 2009, where his focus has been advanced ground-based domain awareness sensors and data processing, as well as the continued U.S. space superiority and mission assurance through discovery, advancement, and deployment of these advanced space technologies. Other areas of technical interest and expertise include spectral imaging, optics, imaging process, and in astronomy. So this is the perfect conference for him to be at, that's for sure. Prior to that, he served as the chief engineer and the deputy chief of the technology division for the Secretary of the Air Force Office of Research. And there he directed multi-million-dollar emerging technology budget and developed next-generation space technology. Prior to that, he was at NASIC at the National Air and Space Intelligence Center, where he authored several national intelligence documents and presentations given to national leadership. He's worked on space launch and command and control issues. He has a PhD, as well as Lieutenant Colonel. He's also a PhD in philosophy from the Air Force Institute of Technology. Now, with all that said, that is nowhere near what really his greatest accomplishment has been to date. On the flight from LA to Maui, Colonel Blake was the one that successfully I should say, not guessed, calculated math, and picked the halfway point, halfway to Hawaii contest. And I think he won a travel book for that. So again, the PhD and the rise in the ranks has nothing compared to that. So with that said, Colonel Blake in the commercial space.
So you got to say, I think this is probably got to be the best conference for me to go to. It's certainly better than anything you could have in Omaha, Nebraska. So. I was asked to start off with a few slides about how to win the halfway to Hawaii game, so I will do that. I'm just kidding. All you got to do is divide by 2. It's really not hard. We're going to talk a little bit about commercial and civil SSA, and it kind of dawned on me as I was watching the international panel is that whether you guys realize it or not, you actually have an advantage over us. We may have a lot of toys that we can play with, but we have a lot of history as well. And some of that history makes it difficult for us to step into the next stage. If you look at where our space awareness sensor and where our space awareness program came from, it grew up solidly in the military. The first satellite catalogs were developed so that we could tell missiles different from satellites and didn't launch some kind of preempt or responsive strike based on a Sputnik flyover. But they're solidly from military origins. And I think in some sense today, given the fiscal constraints, the real capability of other civil agencies and the commercial world to fill some of these needs is kind of hampered us. So I would encourage you guys, you have your own fiscal difficulties to deal with. I do read the Washington Post every once in a while. But you're able to, somewhat on the right track of having joint military civil agencies going forward. And we want to try to get to that same area. So I am at DARPA. DARPA is famous for lots of things, the internet, stealth fighter aircraft, et cetera. But one of the beautiful things that we do is we go and develop things that the military and the Department of Defense might not be ready to develop yet. And we can go and explore those ideas freely without a lot of thought to policies, implementation, data security, all those things that might hamper other organizations from saying, you know what, this is going to be really difficult. I can just go do it and see what the technology leads me. So one of the areas that has led us in the SSA area is trying to go after what we saw Dr. Beeson talk about this morning, which was non-traditional data sources, bringing in commercial data, moving from a data-centric to an information-centric architecture, and trying to be able to show that, yeah, you can actually work with all this data, and the world won't come to an end. So in fairness to all the people who will be here on Friday, you might be able to tune out for the next 5 minutes because you'll see all these charts again. Or you can pay attention and ask harder questions on Friday. Either. So what we're after is something we've been titled Space Domain Awareness. It's an unfortunate 3-letter acronym that also fits with Space Data Association. In the end, it's probably okay because the two are going to become like that. We've been talking over lunch, and I think we had some good discussions already. So we've been really focused on geo and looking and trying to solve a lot of the geo issues. And what we want to do is provide a lot of the indications and warnings that we've done with the Space Surveillance Telescope and the IBEX program, of which, again, plug for Friday. You will see briefings on those Friday. Has gone a long way to try to provide indications and warning to the JSPOC, to warfighters, of when something is going to happen in space so they can make those notifications. What we want to do is actually try to extend that down to other orbits. The benefit of GEO is that it really doesn't move. If I put a sensor in place, I can always stare at it. Not so much for LEO, damn Kepler. But what we want to do then is we got to move the sensors to where the satellites are, because we can't just take a look at a satellite, once every couple, a couple revs as it orbits the Earth. We need to be able to provide a little more global coverage. Well, that's actually easy enough to do if you can write me about a $2 trillion check. I can take care of that for you. So how do we do that in a little more fiscally efficient manner? And what you see there on the slide there is that, if you look at the time scales there in hours, we can do a pretty good job looking at all those natural perturbations, things moving gently around in orbit. We kind of have the time scales there, but nowhere near trying to look at those active orbital maneuvers. And that's the area that we're trying to go after. So we have a lot more background on this on Friday, but in the end, you saw this last year as we plotted the cost per byte and byte per year, and we got a lot of good feedback, and we incorporated that feedback into our next generation rev here. You can see is what we're trying to do is we put all those sensors and how much they cost and what we're getting out of them, and we want to try to get to the far side of that curve. We want to get more data for less money, so that we can meet what we think are the threshold and objective numbers of the amount of data that you need. And again, we have a lot more to go into this. The bottom line is that we as a nation and we as the Department of Defense can't buy this much data. Or I'm sorry, we can buy this much data. We can't buy the sensors that it takes to get this much data. So Shrock and I go way back, and I don't feel wrong in saying that I might disagree with him because we have done so many times over the years. But it's not necessarily the people that cost a lot of money. It's the maintenance. It's all the illities, the supportability, the tech documents, all those things that go to maintain a sensor. Those are what costs money. And it's not that it actually costs a lot of money. It's that it costs a lot of money for the Department of Defense to do it. If you look at what it costs a contractor to run something and what it costs the government to run something, especially when you throw that operational word on top of it, wow, 2 orders of magnitude more cost. So what I'm betting is that you guys can provide that same data that I could go try to get from a government sensor for a lot less money. And what I want to do is just buy the data from you. Because in the end, that's what I really want. As much as I'd like the Air Force to be a jobs program for lieutenants, We really don't need them out running these sensors, or let's be honest, they're not running the sensors, they're watching a contractor run the sensor. But in the end, it still costs a lot of money, when all I really need is just the data. And just as a final slide, so we went out there and said, you know what, these things do exist. And again, another plug for Friday. I'll show you a couple of them right off that we've already started to do this with. If you look at the telescopes that NASA has, these instruments there, universities, they have better systems than the government owns. And a lot of corporations actually own a lot of, it's amazing what the government gives away for free at the end of a contract. That equipment there can be recapitalized and reutilized for another purpose for, pennies on the dollar for what the original development was. And that's what this is about. It's about taking advantage of those investments that somebody else made and finding the right incentive structure in order to put those into place. So depending on what you want to do, it's been amazing. Since we've kind of started to talk about this, I've been offered satellites to buy. I've been offered radars, more telescopes than I can count. So you'd be amazed about how many sensors are out there and how much capital there actually is to utilize. So in the end, it's about how do we put it all together and utilize the data in the right form, the right fashion, with the right security, with the right data surety, in order to feed it into more data is more good, and be able to utilize it. So we'll talk more about that Friday and some of our other plans as far as data processing and such. But that's where we're coming from a DARPA perspective. And what I want now is for each of the panel members to give a short introduction for who they are, where they come at this venue from a commercial civil perspective, what their issues are. You should find it very entertaining. We met over lunch. They're nothing but opinionated. So I would encourage you to ask them provocative questions, and go ahead and start sending in your questions now. Because we're not going to spend a whole lot of time doing the introduction. We're going to get to your questions. And I think we go to like 7:30 tonight. So go ahead and send in as many questions as you want. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Thanks, Colonel. My name is Andrew Duva. This is a policy conference, so you have to have at least one lawyer. You've got him. I run a small consultancy called Providence Access, but my background is in the commercial SATCOM area. I left private practice in Washington to go join New Sky Satellites and manage their government relations, regulatory affairs, and market entry for that provider before it was bought by SES. And as part of doing that job, before I started the consultancy, New Sky started supplying a lot of capacity to the Department of Defense in support of government missions, Operation Iraqi Freedom, and what followed. And I got very interested in mission assurance and the risks associated with providing services to the government. And that led me eventually to think about collision avoidance and the increasing, let's say, crowdedness at GEO and the changes in the EMI RFI environment. So it's getting difficult to communicate and track down interference. Which led me to think about, well, how can we solve this? And at New Skies, I went to the DoD and said, can you help us with this? And the short answer was, no, and you're a Dutch company, get out of here, we don't even want to talk to you. A few years later, there was the CFE program, and that was a huge improvement. And then that led to the SSA data sharing program, another big improvement. But it's not enough. And as we said, we'll be opinionated about this. But I think we're at a critical time. We have opportunities. There are more actors than ever in space coming in, but we have a limited budgets. We heard that this morning from Eric Raven and others. And that leads to trying to solve problems, hard problems, in innovative ways. And that's what commercial industry does in the satellite area. It's interesting because when I look at the U.S. government overlay for how things are done with SSA, it involves huge sensors and cadres of people and decades of experience. And the commercial satellite industry just assumes that that's all there and takes advantage of it and then tries to make a profit on providing service. So we're the beneficiaries of lots and lots of investment. But what's interesting is that commercial operators are able to operate with almost no regulation or oversight from governments. If you look at what's required to get a satellite license from the US government or from many other countries that I looked at, it's almost nothing. And you're just assumed to be operating safely and responsibly, and that may or may not be the case. So when the operators got together to try to solve the SSA problem through Space Data Association, which was formed a few years ago, one of the key things that we did, and I designed the structure of the SDA, that was my contribution to it and supporting it, is we tried to look at how do we build best practice and encourage best practice and develop norms. There's always an example that's given about, well, space is like the maritime domain. Well, of course we know it's not, but if you think about the maritime domain now, there are norms of behavior. You pass port to port with ships. There are navigation aids and charts made available to avoid hazards. There's a duty to assist mariners in distress. There are regulations about collisions and how to avoid them. None of this exists in the space environment today, but we think it ought to. And for example, with the SDA, we did one thing through private law, which is we had operators sign up and agree to give data. And we do some processing and provide conjunction warnings that I'm sure we'll talk about on the panel or in response to your questions. But the key thing we do within SDA is that operators who sign up and provide data have an obligation to provide planned maneuver information before they maneuver. So we've established through private law an obligation and a restriction on operation that is a new norm. And this allows, if you think about it, by signing up for that allows the space data center, the information system, to actually calculate and avoid conjunctions, because it doesn't have to look based on sensors, which there are plenty of sensors and inputs, but it can also look into the future because it knows where operators plan to maneuver. That's a big deal, and we hope that will become the norm for responsible space operations. Of course, there's always going to be cases, military intelligence, et cetera, where that won't be the case. But we think for most space operations, that's probably where we want to go. The challenges, though, in evolving the policy environment, the operating environment, to one where it looks like the maritime environment today, is that there are national security imperatives in space, and so we're not ever going to have full transparency. There's the sovereignty issue that's just simply there, and nation states are going to keep certain things secret, and we'll deal with that. We'll have to deal with that. But I think the opportunity before us is one of being able to take lots of different data sources, find ways to merge them and get information out of them. And it won't be perfect, but it will be better than the silos we have today. So although I commend the DoD and the leadership the US has shown in establishing the SSA data sharing program and going out and signing up folks to provide information and provide warnings in response, we've been told in a meeting last fall that in fact the current information systems are not able to process that information. So we are in this period where we're going to have a collection of systems, SDA, the JSPOC, other data fusion centers. And I think through that, we're going to develop ways of working better together. So I think that's what commercial industry can do, is we don't have to think about the diplomatic implications or decades of investment, and we're not worried about giving up national security secrets. We can just try to do what we think the best operational approach is, and that's what SDA is all about. So I hope you'll challenge us on questions and look forward to taking them. Thanks.
I'm Laurie Newman. I'm from NASA Goddard Space Flight Center in the Robotic Space Protection Program, and that sounds like an important title, but it really consists of 3 people. So I'm responsible for providing space situational awareness support to NASA's unmanned fleet, also sometimes called robotic fleet. One main part of that role is to provide conjunction assessment risk analysis for about 67 spacecraft. So that includes the NASA fleet plus some international partner missions, United States Geological Survey missions, the NOAA LEO fleet, and a couple of Air Force missions. So NASA receives conjunction assessment data from the JSPOC based on ephemeris data that we provide to them, and that feeds into a risk analysis process that we perform so that we can help our owner-operators to decide how to mitigate any risks that we determine require that support. In addition, we've just recently joined the Space Data Association. We use SDA to screen our maneuver EFEMs against those of other owner-operators, so that augments the support that we receive from the JSPOC. And I just wanted to note that human spaceflight, space situational awareness, and conjunction assessment is managed out of NASA Johnson Space Center, and so my remarks should not be assumed to apply to human spaceflight. And as we've talked about during the day, SSA is broader than just conjunction assessment. SSA enables space asset protection, and NASA is both a producer and a consumer of SSA data. Collaborating and sharing this data across military, civil, and commercial sectors is critical to meeting the National Space Policy Intersector Guidelines to improve safety of flight for all operators. In order for NASA to effectively contribute to global SSA initiatives, it's important to share available data in a timely fashion. So NASA has an agreement with US STRATCOM to send anomaly data in near real time to the JSPOC for analysis. But the collection of that data presents several challenges. Software to collect and analyze the spacecraft telemetry data requires funding that's not currently allocated. Each spacecraft uses different telemetry systems, so retrofitting this new requirement back onto existing operations programs is very challenging. And spacecraft operators are kind of afraid of sharing false positives when they find something that could be anomalous, but they're not really sure if they just screwed something up. They don't want us sending that data out to the JSPOC and then having to admit that they were wrong. So overcoming these challenges will take time. In an era of tightening budgets, collaboration allows agencies to achieve more with less and prevents duplication of effort. So NASA actively seeks collaboration and sharing opportunities. In the past, we've worked with US STRATCOM to examine the required screening volume size that would allow capture of a given % of risky close approach events. Strat provided a large data set to augment the data that we had been collecting over the years, and when we were finished with the analysis, we shared that back with them. And JSPOC has now chosen to implement those volumes across their entire customer base, allowing a well-understood baseline for standardizing conjunction assessment runs for their customers. So NASA is currently examining covariance realism in conjunction with the National Reconnaissance Office, the results of which will hopefully contribute improved operations procedures for both organizations. Also, NASA is working on a joint study with Air Force Space Command and SMC to produce empirical satellite error growth curves as a function of tracking density for different canonical orbit regimes and propagation intervals. Civil space is unique in how it produces and consumes data, so it needs to remain distinct from commercial and military in defining requirements for potential future initiatives such as a combined space operations center or a space traffic management center or anything like that that's going to infuse the technical products that we produce. So it's important that the military obtain contributions from or review by civil and commercial sectors of these plans as they develop them to ensure that the chosen implementations will meet everyone's needs. NASA decision makers agree that space asset protection is important, and they've created an agency-level working group to establish protection policy and procedures. SSA is one of those areas of importance. As NASA continues to grow its SSA program, it's kind of uniquely poised to contribute to the global SSA initiative through our subject matter expertise in the related fields, but also because NASA tends to be more of an R&D organization, building one-off kinds of things to feed back into operations, that we can provide advanced innovative approaches, and we have flexibility in interfacing with commercial and international entities as we've historically done. Thanks.
Hello, my name is Brian Minglesser. I want to apologize in advance. I got a little bit of a scratchy throat, so I'll try to speak up. I want to start by thanking the organizers here, Lieutenant Colonel Travis Blake, and for the opportunity to share my comments with my esteemed colleagues. Hopefully I'll be able to provide a little bit of a unique perspective on the implementation side with respect to technology innovation. I work in the technology innovation group at SES, which is a portion of new satellite procurements. And in particular, we see an opportunity for taking advantage of new technologies and developing new new business plans and new ways of looking at our operations and how we can improve that. I think there's a lot that can be done with our existing technology, but we need to shift our mindset a little bit to be more proactive in monitoring and measuring our existing operations. In the context of space situational awareness, obviously this is for mission assurance and conjunction assessment, but I also think a crucial component of that, and one where we see a lot of interest to improve our understanding, is in the spectrum management and radio frequency interference issues, which have continued to build up as the industry grows. I think one of the most core things that's very clear to me, based on my experience thus far, is that there's a lot more that can be done, and it's not for a lack of technology. One example, we did a lot of additional analysis work in the mitigation of Galaxy 15. Actually, last time I was here in Hawaii, we were working on that, and
someone bring up Galaxy 15.
It's a great story. It's a great story, and I think there's a lot of lessons that were learned from that. In particular, the analysis that can be done with data that we get already, and certainly it does not require the development of new technologies, but new technologies do support or will support improved operations of the fleet, of our commercial fleet. I think there's a gap at present, even though there's a number of opportunities for new technology implementations. There's a small gap between demonstrating the value of this type of data in a commercial setting. Obviously, there's a value from a national strategic perspective as well. But if we can close that gap by demonstrating the value of technology and demonstrating the value of data, which can be data products, in improving the operations of our fleet, in addition to the value which can be added to national to accomplishing the objectives that we have. Lastly, I think I would like to share one perspective in terms of sustainability that I think I sort of see the problem that we face now as one of a frog in a boiling pot of water, and that maybe the capabilities that we have were sufficient for the situational for the situation 10 years ago, but as the industry continues to grow, that's not the case anymore. A lot of low-lying problems, which are maybe under the noise floor, that are a result of just increased congestion, increased traffic. That creates new problems which the existing capabilities are not able to handle. I think, whenever we're looking for to develop new technologies and new systems to aggregate the sources of data and pull together a much better understanding, I think we should consider how this is going to evolve over time in the next 10 or 20 years, and we should not focus on a system that 10 or 20 years from now will again be inadequate for the situation as it exists then.
Thanks, Brian. Good afternoon, everybody. How are you guys doing? Or I guess I should say aloha. Oh, that's better. All right. For those of you that don't know me, which is probably most of you, my name is Tobias Nassif, and I am the Vice President of Satellite Operations and Engineering for Intelsat Corporation. And as a matter of full disclosure, I'm also the current chairman of the Space Data Association. But my comments today mostly will be focused on as Intelsat and not the SDA. I think there's enough SDA talk over the other end. But it's going to creep in here because it's important. Anyways, at Intelsat, we are a satellite operator. We are currently operating 76 satellites in GEO, MEO, and HEO orbits. And we are doing that with 81 people, 81 satellite engineers and satellite controllers. 14 of those people being flight dynamics engineers that do all the orbit determination, the collision avoidance work, as well as all our end-of-life fuel predictions on our fleet of satellites. So quite a busy group of people, as you could imagine. And we do that 76 satellites. We currently use a number of antennas to do that. And I consider those antennas part of a sensor network that we have for accurately predicting the location of our satellites. So just out of curiosity, does anybody know how many sensors are in the space surveillance network that the US uses? I don't either. Pardon? 30, okay, so 30, and that's probably right, and 30 sensors are tracking the 20,000 plus objects in the catalog, is that correct? Give or take? All right, good enough. We have 150 antennas that we use for TT&C. That's 150 sensors conducting 1,500 ranging sessions per day, giving us highly accurate information of where our spacecraft are. And that's Intelsat, and I'm sure my colleagues at SES, Eutelsat, and Telesat, and others, probably about the same number on average of antennas, sensors in that matter, and a number of ranging sessions. So we do know where our spacecraft are. I also like to point out that, we're talking here about space situation awareness, and SSA is not just a government concern. I mean, most of the talk today has been, we had a great panel this morning on U.S. policy for SSA. The panel from the international group was outstanding on the international concerns of SSA. Well, commercial operators are very concerned with SSA, and very much for the same reasons. Our biggest concerns are, especially in the ComSat world that most of us come from, are EMI and RFI. That's a big problem that we face in our community. Collision avoidance. We operate and we make our money from the space that is up there. If we pollute that space or have collisions that provide that space unusable, we no longer can operate as a corporation. Well, not very effectively at least. And also space weather. Space weather is an issue that's growing and concerning, and we need to do a better job of predicting space weather and what those impacts are on our spacecraft. Just by the way, I had a whole bunch of notes I've written down. I couldn't make any sense of them, tried to put them in better order, and got the same thing. So I may kind of ramble here a little bit, just so you know.
Yeah, it looks exactly the same.
No, there's still more on this first page than there are on the second one. So where was I? Anyway, so space weather, collision avoidance, and EMI RFI are big concerns of us. The whole gamut that was mentioned earlier by both the U.S. and international panel is the key components of space situation awareness. I failed to mention when I was talking about our 1,500 ranging sessions a day, we also do about 230 commanding sessions a day. And in 2011, we conducted 16,000 maneuvers on our fleet of satellites. So the spacecraft that we operate do not sit still. They do not wait for an observation, and then that can be propagated out. They are moving, some of them maneuvering 8 times per day. So anyhow, I'll come back to that in a little bit later. Now, whereas the risk of collision is actually fairly low, and there's been a study by the insurance industry that obviously is very, very well interested in what is the risk of collision, that put the risk of collision to a point where it doesn't impact our insurance premiums. That there's more of a likelihood of an anomaly on orbit, infantile failure of a spacecraft, a launch failure that drives the insurance premiums than a risk of collision. However, I think as everybody here can agree, if we had a collision, the impact is catastrophic, particularly a collision at GEO. So we do want to take all the steps necessary to prevent a collision in GEO. However, being a fiscally conservative commercial satellite operator, we don't want to spend a lot of money doing it. So we are constantly looking for how do you operate the most cost-effective, not only TT&C network, obviously 81 people is fairly lean, and how do we do our collision avoidance at the least cost possible. So some of those issues is what we, along with SES and in Marsat, decided to create the SDA, the Space Data Association, as a cost-effective way to address some of the space situation awareness needs that we had. The primary focus of the SDA, as you heard, is around collision avoidance, EMI, RFI, mitigation, and also just a contact database. So if we do have an issue with another member spacecraft or object in space, we know who to call for that particular object. Because as you may or may not know, many satellites owned by one company may be actually operated by somebody else. I mean, of that 76 satellites that we operate, 25 of those are for third parties. So if you see a satellite that says, hey, DirecTV, I'm going to call DirecTV to find out why I'm having a conjunction with you. Well, if you call DirecTV, they're going to have any idea what you're talking about because Intelsat flies the satellites for DirecTV. That doesn't mean call me if you can't get reception, though. It's a ground problem. Trust me. Okay, so where were we here? So we created the SDA because we had this need for better SSA. And a lot of that was because we weren't satisfied, we weren't comfortable with the products that we are getting currently at the time. This was at the beginning of the CFE program. Now I do have to say things have gotten better over time. So there is a little more timely access to information or delivery of information. It has gotten better over the years, but still today, it is not meeting the needs of at least the commercial operator, and I will say it isn't meeting the needs of most spacecraft operators. We heard today from Tiffany of the report from the Secure World Foundation, about the systems that the JSPOC is currently using and the fact that they're antiquated. Well, that's true. So, I mean, and it's not the fault of the JSPOC operators. The people in the Air Force running the JSPOC are some great folks, don't get me wrong, but the tools they have been given to do their job are not sufficient for what they have to do, and that needs to be fixed. Now, the question is, how are they going to fix it? Are they going to go the long road of acquiring systems that are very expensive and probably not going to be fielded for years and years, or will they go and buy something off the shelf that is available today that can solve probably 80% of their need? I don't know, but I would tell you what we would do, or what we did. Oops, that's enough. Anyways, so when we put the SDA together, we did ask that question. We were asked, why are you doing this? And we told the JSPOC and STRATCOM why the SDA came together is because we can't wait for them to do a better job. And they tell us, there will be systems that are coming online that will be ready to do this. And we ask, when will that happen? 5 to 10 years. Well, 5 to 10 years is way too long to wait. Now, granted, this was 3 years ago, 4 years ago. Things may have changed in the interim, but systems still aren't there today. We provide our owner-operator ephemeris data to the JSPOC routinely. Does it get used on a routine basis? No, it doesn't. Anybody providing owner-operator ephemeris today, and I will say 9 times out of 10 that data is falling onto the floor unused, that the JSPOC runs their conjunctions against their catalog, Their catalog, whether it be TLE data or SP data, and I don't have facts and evidence on this, but I can be probably rest assured that if you were taking an observation of one of my satellites today, right now, and an hour later I maneuver, and you propagate off your observation using, whether it's using the general purpose propagator or an SP propagator, whatever it is, 7 days, 14 days out, you're not going to know where my satellite is. So unless you are using the most current available data from an owner-operator, you will not be accurate. So how do we fix this? And let me just say that this is not, again, as I mentioned before, this is not just a commercial operator's perspective or Intelsat's perspective. We've had discussions. In November of 2011, we had a meeting with representatives of the SDA representing the commercial operator community, the 50th Space Wing, Stratcom, and JSPOC. And it was at that meeting that one of JSPOC's commanders, a colonel at JSPOC, told us the CSM messages are not to be used for actionable SSA. They are a warning only. Well, then what is out there to use as actual SSA? Anyhow, the only way we're going to solve this problem is if we work together. Data fusion. We need to take data that we have, take data that the JSPOC may have, take data that other sensor operators have, ESA, Astrium with their network, Boeing with their network, the Maui Observatory, everybody who has data, combine it together to form a collective space situational awareness picture if we are going to operate in space safely. Now, how that comes together, who runs it, how it's done, I don't want to get involved with that. I'm an operator, not a policy person. But that's the only way we're going to solve this problem. And that's the only way we're going to solve this problem. I'm going to stop right there, because I'm probably fired by now.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. So we have the first question as a follow-up. They want to know how many of your maneuvers are for collision avoidance, of all the maneuvers that you have.
Back in 2011, we conducted 3 maneuvers for collision avoidance purposes. So we received over 200 CSM messages from the JSPOC. 3 of those resulted in actually having to do a maneuver. I would say close to, or a majority of them were false alarms. As we were told earlier, they weren't considered false alarms, but that's what we consider them. When we get a message, for instance, there was a message that came out today that indicated 2 satellites, happened both to be SDA participants, had a 2-kilometer close approach. Well, when we used the owner-operator FEMRIS to rerun that, it's found out that there was an 85-kilometer distance. So therefore, what was a close approach really is not a close approach, and therefore, we consider that a false alarm. That took extensive manpower to go through there and look and evaluate to find out that we really are not at risk. That we consider a false alarm. I'm not sure if the JSPOC considers that a false alarm, but that's what the commercial world considers a false alarm.
Okay. Next question's for Andrew. Are there accuracy requirements on state vector data providers?
So 2 answers to that question in terms of ingest to the SDC. Before data is ingested into the SDC, it is validated by the system operator, which is AGI and CSSI. So they essentially check the quality of the data before it becomes routinely ingested into the system. And I would, urge you to talk to somebody like T.S. Kelso, who's here in the audience, on the details of that. I can't give you that. From a legal perspective, one of the things that SDA is able to do that governments aren't is we're able to wave our hands and sign agreements amongst our participants to say that data is provided as is, and we can duck a lot of the liability questions. So what we do receive into the SDC is the highest quality information that a satellite owner operator will generate, but the satellite owner operator does not make any warranties as to the quality of the data from a legal perspective, and that allows us to actually take that data in without getting hung up on liability questions.
Okay. Given the lack of collaborative progress between SDA and the JSPOC, and given the documented false positives and negatives, do you foresee the SDA pursuing investments in sensors and their own data set generation? Whoever wants to answer it.
No. Interesting enough, when the SDA first formed and we had our first meeting with the U.S. government, that was the first question out of one of the government attorneys' mouths was, are you going to build your own sensors? And we said, no, we're commercial operators. We don't have money to build sensors to track stuff in space. But again, what we do have is plenty of sensors we use, or plenty of antennas we use in our daily operations that actually track our data. So in a sense, we do have sensors, not to track debris, but to track our satellites. What we don't have, and I didn't mention it earlier, is we don't have access to debris data. And that is the one thing that the SDA needs in order to really become an effective mechanism for SSA, is that debris data. And we have been attempting to work with the DoD for the past 4 years in trying to get access to higher quality debris data to no avail, to the point where we have offered to provide them one of our systems that can process our data, their data, debris data, at no cost, to try this out as an experiment, and we've had no response from DoD. This letter was sent out 3 years ago, still no response from DoD. It's always, well, we'll get to it, we're thinking about it, another national emergency has come up, or this crisis, or there's security concerns. And we are ready to answer any of those questions when they're ready to sit down and talk to us. But since we can't wait forever, we are starting to search for alternate sources of data. So any of you folks out there that have a debris catalog, we're willing to listen to you, because we cannot wait any longer for the U.S. government to participate with us.
Just a quick follow-up to clarify the proposal SDA made to the government, U.S. government. Some people get the false impression that SDA is asking for release of debris data that is considered, I think it was the colonel from France who pointed out that the hardest data problems are the ones that are concerning data that's sensitive but unclassified. So what SDA has said is we'll provide a system, we'll operate the system inside a SCIF or a U.S. government facility. You can have release authority on the data product. So we're asking for access to data, but we're not asking for the release of that sensitive data outside government channels. So there is no security risk. And sometimes people think, well, you're asking us to release the catalog. We've never asked for that.
All right, so do you guys consider using ISON data?
Yes, we are.
Absolutely.
What is the SDA doing to address the problem of non-cooperative targets, those targets that do not belong to SDA members?
Well, that is basically what I just mentioned, is we do not have access to anything other than the SDA member data. Now right now the SDA in our data center, we have about 320 plus objects that we are currently processing in our data center. So basically by definition, if you're not in our data center, you're debris. Even if you're $1 billion worth of debris, you're still debris in our mind. So what we're trying to do is get access to a catalog where that data may be. And as Andrew said, we're not asking for release of the catalog or unfettered access, but in my opinion there are national security concerns. The U.S. government has them. Any government that has a satellite may have concerns. And quite frankly, I don't need to know where your satellite is or what it's doing. Just keep it away from our member satellites. So whether it's debris and you give us a conjunction summary, or if it's an active satellite that you don't want anyone to know where it is, just know where we are and stay away. Fair enough?
Okay. What is the Space Data Association's policy on sharing data with non-SDA members?
We don't do it. We don't share data. We share analytic products based on data to other members and participants in the association. So nobody would give us data or information on their on EMI, RFI, if what we were providing with a membership is access to a database. That's not what SDA is about. It's about operational support, as Toby said, to solve specific problems. So if you're interested in solving operational problems, if you're a satellite operator, you can see us. If you're interested in solving RFI issues and geolocation issues, SDA might find a way to work with you to, take data in or support problem resolution. But getting access to the data alone is not something that SDA is even able to do. One of the things that we sign with the members is a binding legal agreement that says we will not release data unless your data to a third party unless you allow us to, with one exception, and the exception is that if SDA and its reasonable judgment determines that there's a risk of safety of flight, so there's going to be a conjunction, we reserve the right to release that data to try to mitigate that situation. But that's it.
Okay, we'll put a call out for any questions about NASA. Maybe any non-SDA questions might be useful. But we have a couple more SDA ones. Do you prefer to have too many false positives based on a loss of larger screening volumes or less data with shorter reaction times?
Oh, could you repeat that?
I'm sorry, yes. Do you prefer to have too many false positives based off of larger screening volumes or less data with shorter reaction times? The assumption there is a collision.
It's not a real choice. What we want is the best data used, right? If you combine all the best complementary data, then we can set whatever your pain threshold is, and you can make the choice. But that question's
one of the things our system does allow is that each operator, each member can go in and set the alert criteria that they're looking for. They want to be alerted at 100-kilometer misses. That can be done. If they want to be notified only if it's 5 or less, 2 or less, that can be set. Volumes can be set. And what's the other? And there's another couple parameters which escape me because I don't set them.
All right, Lori. So I got a question from a 202 area code. Do you have your cell phone on you? That's...
I do, but it's not a 202
Oh,
area
okay.
code.
It says, what challenges does SDA membership address for NASA?
So NASA chose to join SDA because the JSPOC is not currently able to take our ephemeris that contains predictive maneuvers and screen it routinely against other owner-operator spacecraft that contain predictive maneuvers. So if there was going to be a close approach between two maneuverable spacecraft caused by both of them maneuvering, the JSPOC process would not currently detect that. So joining SDA at least allows our spacecraft to be screened against other members. It obviously doesn't cover us against spacecraft that aren't members, but it's just another piece of data that helps add to our SSA picture so that we can have as much data as we can to help with the safety of our spacecraft.
As a follow-up, how was NASA able to get beyond legal hurdles to join SDA?
It took a while to deal with all those lawyers, but but really it was just a procurement, and it went very smoothly. And
it was lawyers within NASA, just to be clear.
yes.
It actually only took 5 days from the real go decision to actually get on contract.
It's getting permission to put the procurement in that took a long time.
Yeah, so just as it's not a technology issue, what we have with SDA and the U.S. government is an inertia issue and a culture issue. So we have to show that we're able to fill that niche and provide added value, like we do with NASA, to cover those edge cases, as we all are trying to evolve to sort of a single operational picture. We won't get there unless we do things like this.
Here's a good one for you. What responsibility does NASA take in regards to debris? I guess that might be a human spaceflight one with creation of debris or something. I don't know.
There's some debris creation, but I won't speak to that.
Those are things that NASA doesn't talk about?
No, I'm just not responsible for it, so I don't want to put words in someone else's mouth. There is some responsibility for looking at orbital debris removal, and things like that as specified in the National Space Policy, but that's handled out of the Office of the Chief Technologist, and I'm not directly involved in those activities.
Okay. Back to SDA. Are there any membership restrictions? Are there any membership restrictions for SDA?
Yes, SDA membership is open to any owner or operator of a satellite. So if you own a satellite, you operate a satellite, you are welcome to become a member of the SDA. That's either commercial, civil, military. I think that's about it. Alien, we'll take those. But that is a criteria, is you must be an owner or operator of a spacecraft in order to be part of the SDA.
Okay, here's a good one. How does NASA get past some of the frustrations expressed by SDA and Intelsat? I don't think you were expressing any frustrations, were you?
Not anymore. I got them all off my chest.
I mean, obviously, there's always challenges with being able to make improvements in how data is processed and how you can use it effectively. But I try to take a very collaborative approach, work together with the JSPOC to figure out the best ways to do things, and work as a team as much as possible. And I think it's worked out very well. They provide great support, and it's been a very good partnership.
This one's actually for me. What is DARPA's position regarding using commercial SSA data to solve SAA challenges? If you didn't hear earlier, come back on Friday. There will be an entire 20-minute presentation on how we want to initiate a technology demonstration where we will do exactly that. We will take commercial, civil, whatever data source you want to provide, and we will look at putting together the right procedures, architectures, data assurance, et cetera, whatever we need into place to judge the value of your data. Now, I will say this as a little bit of a tease. Just because you have data doesn't mean you have valuable data. One of the things that you'll see on Friday is we went through a lot of great pains to come up with a useful data metric. As people pointed out last year, if I collect 200 observations of the same satellite within 10 minutes, 199 of those may not be that useful. Maybe 198 may not be that useful. So you got to look at what the right value of that data is, and we'll talk more about that on Friday. Man, you're like Miss Popular right now. Everybody's giving you questions. What is the false positive negative rates for the CSMs they receive from the JSPOC? I assume they means NASA.
So NASA doesn't receive CSMs. We receive OCMs, which is largely the same data, but a few differences. I don't know exactly what our false positive rate is. We take the data in, we process it automatically based on our screening volume criteria, and we decide which events to react to based on a number of factors. We look at not only how close the object is and the probability of collision, but also the quality of the orbit determination solution. We get additional data beyond just the OCM. We get data on how the object is tracked, which sensors track the object, and we use all of that to look at each event and decide how much risk it is and whether or not we're going to recommend to the operator that they mitigate that risk. But I can't speak to an exact percentage.
Well, I would just add probably, Lori, that you don't know yet because you've only had one source of data, essentially. And maybe once your satellites are fully ingested in the SDC, you'll have another source to compare against and to see what the rate is. I mean, that's what we saw. I mean, we had this notion we weren't seeing things or things weren't working exactly right, and we started the SDA, stood up the SDC, and once we were processing, we really were all shocked at what we were seeing, and that's where the frustrations are coming from, is because we've learned something here, and we need to rectify it, and we have not been able to rectify it as of yet.
Okay, so got a lot of good SDA, NASA questions. So one more challenge for you guys: a free drink at the reception tonight to the best space-themed lawyer joke. Okay, if SSA, so we'll suspend reality for a second and believe there is such a thing as a space lawyer. If SSA data could be securely fused, provided to all networks, partners, IC, DoD agencies via one single magical Disney authoritative multi-level security database, how much value would this add to everyone? What would be the biggest benefit and what would be the least? So if you got everything you wanted, what would be the biggest benefit?
The benefits, if we use the best, if we could wave a wand and use the best data everywhere, and that would also, I assume, be a multinational. I don't know if that was in the question.
That was not in there, but you can
Okay,
assume anything you want.
well,
You're at the head of the table with the microphone.
Okay,
It's a
there
very
you go.
powerful
So
position.
multinational and all the data living in one place, rectified. I mean, we do that in the SDC now with all the data, we rectify it. But if we could put it all in one place, the benefit would be a common operational picture, and we'd have decision-making based on the same facts. And that, I think, would improve safety of flight. It would reduce the time. It would, I know from a commercial SATCOM perspective, it would greatly reduce the time it takes us to prosecute an EMI RFI event and geolocate the interference source. And that would lead to increased mission assurance and higher service availability. So those are good things.
Anybody else?
Yeah, just to add, it would make me sleep better, one. And also, as Andrew was saying, if we had a good combined common operational picture where we have data that is fused together, validated data, we all are operating off the same, it makes space safer to operate in, which is our primary objective, and therefore allows us to, one, also reduce those costs associated with operating in space.
Okay, next question. Can we talk a little bit about hosted payloads? Who does not want to talk about hosted payloads? Policy and legal challenges, cost sharing philosophy, data use and access. So I think the question will be to the each of the panel members, what do you see the value in hosted payloads? If, either from your systems, other systems providing data, et cetera.
I'll just quickly answer. The value is that you can bring additional capabilities to bear faster or differently. There are a host of challenges, from schedule to business models to, if you have different service suppliers, if it's government furnished hosted payload, did it get on the satellite on time? If you're going to have a condo satellite type arrangement where somebody might not want you to move the orbit, but some other tenant wants you to. It's tough, but it's been done, and it's been done successfully by at least one operator up here on the panel. So it's something we should be trying to take advantage of every way we can.
Yeah, I would agree. I think as Andrew said, there are a number of problems with hosted payloads that everybody seems to ignore, actually. There's a lot of interest in taking advantage of the hosted payload opportunities because of cost savings that can be realized and other advantages. But the hosted payload opportunities need to be matched up well, and from the operator perspective, it has to be in line with the mission as we see it, and not detracting from that. I think in terms of the advantages that hosted payloads can bring, I think proximity in terms of space situational awareness, sort of looking at the limit, having objects in space tell us where they are, if every object had a hosted payload, I think would be a very positive step forward, many steps forward. But hosted payloads can help provide an additional perspective for the data, in addition to what we can do from the ground and LEO with SPSS. But thinking specifically about the GeoBelt, having sensors on board geostationary spacecraft, I think can bring an extraordinary amount of value in terms of data fusion, because it's so much different of a type of source of data.
There's a specific question about NASA's view of hosted payloads, so I think you can't duck this one.
TDRS, C-band.
I don't really work with that. I can't comment on it intelligently.
Comment on that subject intelligently.
Yes.
Let me comment just as a ComSatCom person. NASA is one of the was a pathfinder here with the C-band hosted payload that was, I think, became Orion on TDRS. It was a huge success commercially for them, and it was NASA's vision that allowed that to happen. It was a long time, I think, in the 80s. So it's there.
Okay, so what do you call 1,000 lawyers lost in space?
A good start.
Typically, NASA shares its data publicly. Does NASA publish its part of the SDA publicly?
NASA provides its data to the SDA under the same restrictions that Andrew described before. Our data goes in, it gets screened against everyone else's data, and the only data that gets shared out is if there's a close approach predicted.
That's right.
Then the EFEM might be shared, but it's not passed on.
Correct.
Do SDA members include any LEO systems?
Yes.
Yes. There's, well, besides NASA and NOAA, there's also GOI. GOI is a digital globe, one of those two. Or, oops, they're the same now. As well as we receive data from Iridium and Orbcom. But they are not members.
Okay, so why don't lawyers become astronauts? In space, no one can hear you talk.
That's good. I'm going to use that one.
Okay. Actively maneuvering satellites versus debris seems to be a gap area. Neither JSPOC or SDA is doing a good job for this case. Correct?
Wrong. Active SDA is capturing actively maneuvering satellites if they are members and contributing data, screening against the best debris data to which SDA has access today, which is the TLEs, which are not the best we could do, but it's what we have. So that's how we've solved it for now. There are better ways of solving it. But what we don't have, and this is the problem with the JSPOC capability gap right now, is that the JSPOC isn't processing the actively maneuvering satellites, although they have the best debris data. It's like, it's peanut butter and chocolate. We need to put them together, and they taste better together.
And also I would add to that active satellites is different than maneuverable satellites. JSPOC does active satellites versus debris just fine if that active satellite is providing their maneuver ephemeris or if they don't maneuver. So,
True.
There's one. What percentage of the total operational satellites are in SDA?
We figured 65%. I mean, we're not really sure.
At GEO.
At GEO, about 65%, we believe, is our SDA members.
It's an interesting question. How many COLA maneuvers did NASA perform last year?
last year. So only a portion of our maneuver set, of our mission set is maneuverable. It's about 24 spacecraft right now, I think. And I believe last year we did 11, maybe it was 12. I have the data and I could get it to you, but it's on that order. It's like 11 or 12.
Are you ready, Tobias? You feeling okay? Everything's good? All right. I'm going to ask this one. Just be careful. You might want to move away a little bit. If Intelsat can't afford to pay to help debris tracking, why do they expect the U.S. taxpayers to provide even more than they have already for free?
Well, that's just it. We're not asking for more. I mean, the SSN is in place. The SSN is tracking debris data. It's there. We're asking for the ability to screen our data against that. What the SSN doesn't have is our highly accurate ephemeris. So what we see is a very good quid pro, whatever that lawyer term is, an exchange where we can provide that highly accurate ephemeris data to the Air Force for processing. That frees up their limited amount of sensors from processing those 300 plus objects, and they can focus the limited resources on the unknowns or the unfriendlies or the debris, the junk, anything that's not ours. So therefore, we see this as a win-win by working together where we're providing data and getting existing data, not asking for additional sensors to be built or bought, but allowing the Air Force and others to free up their resources to focus, and knowing that the data they're getting, and that's something where obviously the heart of discussions is how can the Air Force, how can JSPOC trust our data? So that's part of the whole process, to validate, to confirm the data, and maybe do some occasional spot checks on our data. But obviously we go through a lot of effort to make sure that what we have is accurate, what we have is normalized, so that when I am talking to SES, that we are on the same sheet of music. We're talking apples to apples here, and not the old-fashioned way, whereas if we had a collision, a potential collision, or a co-location where we'd have to spend a lot of time making sure we're in the same reference frame, et cetera, that's all done, and it's really simple now to co-locate satellites, to co-operate satellites. That's the benefit we see in this data exchange. So we're not asking the taxpayer to fund more, to pay more. The data is already there, the data is available. I don't think it's going to be going away. But in exchange for access to that data, or the ability to be screened against that data and access to the results, we provide our highly accurate ephemeris.
Okay. Does NASA have active laser ranging? And if yes, how is such illumination treated internationally?
It does have active laser ranging. There's an international laser ranging program that's run partly out of NASA, but that all goes through the laser clearinghouse at the JSPOC.
Let's see. All right, so this is for all of us. Could there ever be a ConOps where commercial and civil entities provide 80% of the capabilities to the military apparatus? I'm going to assume that means that 80% of the awareness is provided by commercial and civil entities. I'll start off with that one. If you look at the pure numbers, it's going to be hard for any commercial or civil agency to match Space Fence, let alone Space Fence plus SST plus SPSS. So that's going to be probably a stretch. Now, that's taking 80% of the data. Now, depending on what your priorities are, if your concern is not so much debris and just missing debris, and your concern more is threats in space, so doing that indications and warning and such, then characterization data may have a higher value to you than pure detect track data. In that case, civil and commercial data streams can become a lot more valuable. So I think when we step off into this, it's not that we're trying to find civil and commercial data sources to replace the volumes of data that Space Fence will take in. The United States government, I can feel confidently saying, and I have a colonel up here shaking his head so he can back me up, is not going to give up on Space Fence, deep space observations, et cetera. What we're looking for are cost-effective ways to fill in the other data that we need. And that is the real value of the civil and commercial, especially with those, the infrastructure that's already in place. So I don't know if others want to add to that.
It's just another opportunity.
Of course, the lawyer has to add something. You just can't let it go.
This is a way for us. If you talk about combined space operations center, or getting commercial and civil and military sitting in the same room or sharing information, there are efficiencies to be gained from those kinds of things. I don't think it comes near to 80%, but to what Toby said, if sensors can be retasked on important missions and deprioritized off routine things because we're sharing more information or we're able to ask questions in the same room, that's a great thing, and we ought to be doing it. Now I'm speaking as a taxpayer, not a lawyer.
Okay. I do have, speaking of lawyers, a remarkable shortage of lawyer jokes. So I'm going to ask these next two as we're starting to get towards the end of the panel here. These next two questions are very similar, and so we'll take them together. First one is, will this group be more involved with the CSPOC going forward versus the JSPOC because of the JSPOC's difficulties? I won't use the word that they wrote. And the other one that we had that was on the similar line is, what does the panel think about new SSA agency in lieu of the JSPOC for interacting with non-DoD entities? So somewhat similar. So, that civilian traffic control system.
Well, personally, more regulation, more control, I never think is a good thing. But as far as SDA, for instance, or commercial operators' participation in the CSPOC, we have heard things in discussions like that a CSPOC needs to come together, a CSPOC needs to be the U.S., allies, and commercial operators, but we have not been asked to participate, to contribute, to be in any kind of discussions, that, at least on an unclassified level. Andrew, do you have any additional info on that?
I guess I think I can say the leading commercial space operators have been heavily engaged in the development of the CSPOC concepts, exploration of options through wargaming, discussions at very high levels within DoD and internationally. And while we did that, we all saw value in ways that could actually be translated into practice. Our impression has been that the U.S. government that was leading those efforts has decided to focus first on government-to-government arrangements, and we see that internationally, rather than bringing in commercial. But we hope that they'll get to us, because we think that we will certainly benefit from closer operational alignment, because these are our customers too. So.
NASA's been involved in the discussions of a CSPOC, or also potentially a space traffic management kind of center of expertise. We'd certainly be willing to play in any of those endeavors, but I don't think any of them have been defined well enough yet to understand what that role would be. But we think it's critical that, as Peter Marquez was saying this morning, that the technical level people have to be involved in deciding how to implement that, to make sure that the decision makers at a high level don't just say, well, we're going to have this kind of system, and then find out that it really doesn't work the way they had anticipated, and we can't get the products out that we need. So.
Right, you have something to add? I've been advised by my lawyer not to answer that question. How does an attorney sleep in space? First he lies on one side, and then he lies on the other. All right. Okay, nope. What is the cost to join SDA, and how can they say they are a not-for-profit organization? And do you have gift cards?
No gift cards yet. The cost to join the SDA is very nominal. Currently, what we charge what we call a standard member, so a typical member, is about $10,000 a year. So I think most organizations spend much more than that just reviewing the legal documentation than actually once they join. Obviously, the executive members, and that's Intelsat, SES, Inmarsat, and Eutelsat, we do pay more than that, but not significantly more. I mean, what it costs to run the SDC on an annual basis is very, very inexpensive. So we feel the $10,000 a year for an organization to join and to have their data screened against other owner-operator data is fairly cheap, not to mention the benefits that are coming for EMI and RFI mitigation, what one day will happen for space weather. Now, as we add those additional features, will there be some additional costs? Most likely, because we are a nonprofit, because obviously with those kind of prices, we basically clear our operating costs, and that's all we're looking to do, is to clear our operating costs to keep the system running and going. So anyone joining out there?
Yeah, I just wanted to add as well. I mean, I think the nominal operating cost does a little bit of a disservice to how much value the SDA actually brings in terms of the data analytics and all of the software behind it. In all of the data sharing that we've done in the past, on an ad hoc basis, all of the manual labor that goes into making sure that we're talking about the same, reference frame as Toby was talking about before. Before we even get into any of the RFI, additional benefits that will come about as a result of the SDA, was much more than $10,000 per year. Getting this system in place, even if you could tally up all of the man hours that were put into it before, the value of having such a solidified system and all of the legal framework around it as well is significantly more than that. And this, not as someone who's been involved from the beginning, but it seems to me that it's a very worthwhile investment because of the enormous amount of value that comes from having such an integrated system.
Okay, so we have 2 more lawyer jokes and 1 more question, and we do have a winner in the lawyer joke competition, so you can just stop turning them in right now. So this one's not the winner. This is, another good one. What do lawyers and orbital debris have in common? It only takes 1 conjunction, you're screwed. Okay, last question. How might the panel propose to fix the gap between the JSPOC and CFEs, commercial foreign entities, given the lack of there even being a 2009 House committee meeting on the topic? How might the panel propose to fix the data gap between the JSPOC and CFEs? All right, we do need more lawyer jokes. I'm sorry.
More lawyer jokes. There's no. The problem, the JSPOC challenge is not that they don't have the data. Okay, the Stratcom's going around the world signing up people sitting in the room and others very effectively. The problem is they don't, and I do encourage everyone, by the way, to find Brian Whedon's excellent paper that was mentioned this morning and read it. The problem is that the systems they have today are not able to use the data. So I don't see a data gap.
You have anything to add?
Well, I think the gap, how do we solve this is first we need to talk. I mean, so far we have not been able to get into a meaningful engagement of how can we solve this issue. And I think once we start doing that, we can find ways to solve this and make space the safer environment that we're all looking for.
Okay. I'll ask the panel members if they have any closing comments before the final lawyer joke, and you actually do want to hear this one. It's actually pretty funny.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, some of my comments and remarks may have been strong, may have been born out of frustration. As I said before, I'm an operator. I'm not a policy person. I don't have much tact. I'd make a terrible diplomat. As I said before, the folks at the JSPOC, Stratcom, the people there are doing an excellent job with the tools that they have, and I think we all need to help them get better tools to do the job better and make this all work.
You've been also advised by your lawyer not to make any more comments.
No more comments. I just think there's an enormous opportunity for collaboration because there are clear strengths in both camps. Obviously, neither side can do both things, but I think with the progress that's already been made with the Space Data Association, that can pave the way for future collaborations, hopefully collaborations between operators and other entities as well in a similar kind of situation, environment that will lead to a much greater situational awareness and a better industry for it. So.
All right.
I just think that this has been a very beneficial day. I've enjoyed all the sessions, and I want to thank the organizers for pulling this together, and I think this has been very beneficial.
Andrew?
I'll just echo what Lori said. I think we've got a lot to think about for the week, and there are many, many things we can do together, as we already are, and just get through this period of challenge. I think it's a very interesting time, and good times are ahead.
I also like to thank the panel members for participating, the audience for your questions and lawyer jokes, and of course the MEDB for setting this up. I think you did a great job, not only with this panel, with all the panels, and obviously found the best panelists that you possibly could. All right, so the winner, and whoever is 703-868-8513, Sandy owes you a free drink. If I can open it up. What's going on? Gotta be kidding me. There you go. How many space lawyers are there in the Star Wars alien bar scene? None. Even alien pirates won't drink with space lawyers.
I don't know how you can top that, you know. Any Star Wars space bar joke is tough to beat. Just to echo what Colonel Blake has said, just tremendous thanks to the panelists, to our policy panel earlier, our international panel, who did a great job as well, and to this lively discussion of shockingly opinionated people. I was really surprised when you said that, but I think we heard some various opinions that will be discussed throughout the rest of the conference. And I think this is a great jumping off point for the conference, for the level of discussion that we'll have on these issues, on the international collaboration issues, and as well as the implication that the policymakers are going to have on the budgets ahead and what we can and cannot do. So I think everything that the panels have put forward was only echoed by the fantastic questions from the audience. And I think this is a great format to have this interaction with the audience to really to glean out the information that these subject matter experts have. So I think that's been an invaluable tool. Thanks Sandy and Jeannie and everyone at the Maui Economic Development Board for setting this up and for giving us all a reason to come out to Maui. As I said earlier, it's a tough duty to have to take this, but I'm sure we'll all be back again next year. And on that note, there is feedback cards that are all around the table. Please fill them out, because if you enjoyed this, please say it. If there's areas that we can improve on, it'd be great to hear that as well, and how we can build off of this, I think, what great success that we had today. And just fill them in and turn them in at the back of the room. And then a last bit of housekeeping. Please, everyone, join us at the reception tonight at 6 o'clock in the Luau Gardens. It's from 6 to 7:30. And we're really looking forward to seeing y'all. And all you folks that flew in on the East Coast, go take and woke up at 3 o'clock this morning, go take a nap for an hour and then join us. But again, thank you everyone for your time and for the great questions and participation, and look forward to seeing you throughout the week. Have a good day. I think the panels were outstanding. I think there's three different panels, on the policy as well as the international, and then the commercial and civil panels, and they all brought something different to the conversation. It's a very similar topic, but each one has their own niche, and I think they covered a lot of the vast amount of the topic areas very well. I think the caliber of speakers that they had with the policy, you had real decision makers from Washington come in. I think that added a tremendous value. Folks that control the budget, have input on the budget. I think that was helpful. I think with the international panel, the cross-section of countries represented, from the Pacific as well as European countries, and what their concerns are, with dealing with the SSA community, and how they interact with the U.S. government, who is obviously the largest user of SSA data and information. And then finally, the commercial panel brought a lot of concerns of the commercial companies that they share, that they're trying to voice to the government. And I think that had a big impact on a lot of the companies that are represented here. I think some of the opportunities are that it exposes what kind of technologies are out there that are available. It gives an opportunity to showcase what a lot of these companies are doing to the government and to the U.S. government and other governments. And I think every year, the commercial sector is advancing in these areas, and the government needs to take note of that, because with the shrinking budget, that's where they're going to have to go. The days of reinventing the wheel are gone. I mean, you have to utilize commercially existing technologies. Lastly, I just think this is a great clearinghouse, of everyone that's involved in the space situational awareness community, coming together and presenting all the different ideas and different policy items and concerns that they have, and as well as the advancement that they made over the years. So I think it's a great opportunity. It's a great conference. It's very well run, and for the technical people, there's something for them, and certainly for the policy people that that there's a lot of areas of great interest for them as well. So it's a fantastic conference so far.